It's always a good time to go back and break down the story of one of the most memorable horror game experiences in gaming with Outlast. If you're new to the channel, we do a complete story breakdown on all types of games, so be sure to go and check out the others as well. Let's break down the story. We open up the story with a classic horror scene. A man driving down a dark country road at night while the radio gently plays in the background. In the distance, we see a large building as the radio begins to turn to static. We can also see a press pass up on the rearview mirror, suggesting that this character might be a journalist. He picks up a note from his passenger's side seat, and it's a transcript of an anonymous email to a Miles Upshaw. It mentions some illegal activity that's been taking place at Murkov's psychiatric system. The person says that they need to send the email quickly as they might be monitoring him. An odd thing to take the time to write, considering you just said you're in a rush and you spent more time writing that. Then, regardless. They did 2 weeks of software consulting at Murkov's psychiatric system facilities in Mount Massive. He says that terrible things have been happening here. Doctors talking about dream therapy going too deep and finding something waiting for them in the mountains. People are being hurt and Murkov is making money before saying that they need to be exposed. We exit that vehicle and get a much better look at the building. This is Mount Massive Asylum, by the way. Even the residents are saying hello. A note found on the bench tells us that Mount Massive shut down amid a scandal in government secrecy in 1971, but reopened by Murkov in 2009 under the guise of a charitable organization. Cell phone reception was cut off abruptly a mile out, and Murkov Corporation has a long track record of disguising profit as charity, but never on American soil. So whatever's going on here at Mount Massive must be big. We take a side entrance into the asylum before the lights very conveniently turn off and we have to use the night vision from our camera to see. Another file is found in one of the nearby offices. It talks about a patient named Billy. A 19-year-old male patient claims to have progressed to self-directed lucid dream states. The activity was observed at an unprecedented scale. Billy also asked about his mother's lawsuit against Murkov and the asylum. Murkov believes this to be a catastrophic breach in security, but note that the only Trager on company records was a Richard Trager, who is an executive at MRD. When entering the library, we can see bodies hanging from the roof and people dead on the floors. This is a clear sign that things at the asylum are not going quite as well for the occupants. We continue a little further and we get a very unwelcome surprise from this gentleman as he throws us down to the lower floor. Miles is drifting in and out of unconsciousness as the second man starts saying that God has sent him an apostle, telling Miles to guard his life as he has a calling. We find another note talking about a patient named Walker, a 32-year-old male that needs to be restrained when interviewed due to his removal of his own lips and nose. It even speaks about how they needed to alter his restraints to accommodate his enormous size. There is a bunch of medical mumbo-jumbo, but what's really important is that he has a fascination with tuatara lizards and has anxiety about his own flesh. He also served in Afghanistan, and there is a lot of evidence that points towards the large man from earlier that threw Miles off the top balcony like it was WWE, which is more likely than not Walker. We come across some patients sitting and watching television, and while a big part of me was hoping that there was some Dora the Explorer on that bad boy, it's only static, which makes it about 1,000 times more creepy. Miles gets himself to the security room and takes a little look at their computer systems. We can see the man from earlier turning off the power on the security camera, and we're forced to make a quick exit. Another file that we find speaks about the MK Ultra program, titled as a CIA document. The subject is hypnotic experimentation and research. It started on the 10th of February 1954 and it took place in Building 13 of Mount Massive Preserve in Colorado. The notes describe a test using hypnosis to force people to do as they say, forcing 2 people asleep simply by pointing and saying that you will sleep. This hypnotic therapy was so effective that they even made a person that had a fear of firearms shoot a gun at another person while in this state. When awakened, both patients mentioned a state of amnesia about the events, and when trying to give that patient a gun again, they refused to pick it up or even accept from the operator, and expressed absolute denial that the previous sequence had even happened. After returning the power to the building, we head back into the security room and are attacked from behind and injected by something. They tell us that we cannot leave, and there is much more for us to witness. That their lord the Walrider is showing his truth to the unbelievers. We then see a Darth Vader wet dream as soldiers begin to be thrown around the room while nothing's there. We awake in a padded room, but luckily still with our camera. We get multiple self-reports from Miles as you go throughout the game, and the message he wrote to himself at this stage named the priest Father Martin, and mentions that a Dr. Vernick is at the centre of whatever is going on here at Mount Massive, but luckily he died 10 years ago. A couple of twins look at us through the bars like we're a freshly cooked tomahawk steak, speaking about wanting to murder us. One questions it due to the preacher asking them to just leave us alone, but their intrusive thoughts get the best of them and decide to allow us a head start before taking dibs on our internal organs. Not that this has much relevance to the overall story at hand, but the guy on the left has claimed our tongue and liver, while the one on the right is more focused on making sure it's as slow and painful as possible. Yay. Upstairs we can find a copy of the death certificate for a Rudolph G. Vernick, the doctor that is responsible for much of the mess going on here at Mount Massive. There is a few things of note to discern from the certificate. For example, he was born in Germany and was 90 years old at the time of his death, spending a total of 55 years of his life in the United States. It says that he was single, which is only notable since it specifies that being widowed or divorced is an option, meaning that Vernick was never married over the course of his 90 years of life. The cause of death given was heart failure due to advanced age. An obituary form for Vernick can be found in a patient padded room, explaining that he achieved his fame from mathematical and scientific communities for a paper written with pioneer Alan Turing. He moved to the United States shortly after World War II with a visa from the State Department. Spending several decades on government research in Los Alamos led to New Mexico, where Vernick apparently retired to pursue landscape photography and take care of his cats. He came to Colorado to do charitable work for Murkoff Corporation and has no next of kin. Miles continues his journey through Mount Massive, trying to find a way to escape this hellhole that he has found himself inside. And eventually we meet this patient that mentions Vernick's death, and simply asks what a dead doctor would experiment on living patients, insinuating that even though Vernick is dead, somehow he is experimenting on patients of Mount Massive. We get chased through some hallways by some patients screaming about the Walrider, before being told on the radio to get into the dumbwaiter in order to live. When we reach the top, we realize that the person on the radio is not exactly our friend, as he beats Miles to a pulp. He mentions that we are the priest's guy, and tells us to take a rest and place us in a wheelchair and straps us in for the ride. You can probably imagine that whatever ride this dude is taking us on is not going to be a fun one. We reach his, I guess you would call it a clinic, and get to set our eyes on some of his patients. He tells one of them to stop yammering because he didn't need his tongue anyway. You can see where this is going. He removes a couple of Miles's fingers before leaving. We take that opportunity to grab our camera and get the hell out of there. Turns out the doctor's name is Rick Trager, and from what we can gather from our other patients and files, he was the head of business development in Mount Massive Asylum. He was a really bad dude that was responsible for drugging female employees before everything went down here at Mount Massive, and afterwards decided to put on this whole surgeon act. We find another note from an orderly at Mount Massive that wrote to HR about the things that he had witnessed since working here, saying that he believed that patients are being abused and has never seen such a consistent level of secrecy and disrespect. He resigns and mentions that he might even consider contacting the press. We take an elevator out of the clinic as Trager attempts to stop us. He gets jammed in the elevator and we manage to escape. Father Martin can be found nearby as he says that he is happy that we survived. He feared that Trager would carve Miles up like all the others and meet him outside. Another note is found that was sent by Rick Trager, saying to accept the immediate resignation of orderly David Annapurna, to process him as a patient of Mount Massive to treat his prosecutorial delusions. Treatment will continue until the time of his death, showing that the orderly that was threatening to go to the press has now been captured by Mount Massive staff. We continue into the kitchen and can find a whole place on fire while a patient is sitting alone. He mentions that he had to burn everything down, as Murkoff has taken so much from them, using them, saying that they were turned into these things because nobody cares about a few forgotten lunatics. So he wants to burn the whole thing down before telling us the safe way out. Honestly, it's pretty damn sad. More files can be found about the MK Ultra program, essentially using sleep induction and hypnotic techniques to make a person do something. Can they create a post-hypnotic control action contrary to individuals' basic morale principles? Then to guarantee total amnesia so the person doesn't remember any of it actually happening. And eventually, the idea that you could completely alter a person's personality. These are the core principles of the MKUltra research. We get our first glimpse of what people are calling the Walrider, using our night vision. It essentially looks like a floating skeleton. We find Father Martin outside as he mentions that we have now seen the Walrider. He says that we have now begun to understand and just sort of runs off for some reason. So we continue to take a look around this murderous asylum. We find another note that gives us some more insight into Dr. Vernick, but this time it was in regards to a project called Paperclip. Essentially, the United States can obtain the services of foreign specialists for specified assignments within the technical services of an army's divisions. But Project 63 aimed to secure the employment in the United States of certain Germany and Austrian specialists after World War II that would deny their services to potential enemy nations. And given the close proximity of dates for Dr. Vernick's stay in the United States, this was likely used for him. Around this time, Miles begins complaining in his notes about a static sound, a buzzing that won't stop, stressing that he needs to find the source of the sound. A file from Berlin, Germany in 1938 has been translated. It tells about growing intrigue in the ongoing work of Dr. Vernick and the morphogenic engine, saying that if they had not seen it for themselves, they would never have believed it. That Vernick has breached the spiritual realm, witnessing an apparition briefly. They believe that this could represent an enormous opportunity for the cause of the German people. Miles reaches a movie theater as a film begins to play. It is an exit interview recorded on December 27th, 1985 in Los Alamos, New Mexico. The subject is Rudolf Vernick. Vernick says that all the films are real, that there is no trickery in the footage. The interviewer asks about some instances of spontaneous bleeding. Half a dozen test subjects began to develop brain tumors. Vernick responds that the autopsies made showed that the tumors were made completely from lead. The interviewer asks why these instances could not be duplicated here in the United States. Vernick mentions that his theory is that in Germany during the years of World War II, the mind of the German people were in a unique place that cannot be replicated. The human mind is an environment capable of extraordinary things. To replicate the results would require proximity to death, to overwhelming madness. Only a subject who has witnessed enough horror was capable of activating the morphogenic engine. To which the interviewer asked if this was something supernatural, which Vernick disagreed with. We hear about Project Walrider being a gateway to something, but what exactly? Vernick is asked to elaborate, but the film cuts off. Miles writes that the engine described is in his head like a song that you can't stop humming. That Walrider is buzzing that he feels in his bones. The dude has been through some crap, essentially. More files show that many of the patients in the asylum consider the Walrider to be a god, the Lord that they pray to and write gospels for. We finally reach the church that Father Martin wanted us to get to, and we find quite the scene. He is essentially on the cross and tells us that he will soon be with the Walrider, telling us that the reason he wanted Miles alive this whole time was so that he could witness this moment and escape to tell the tale. He gets burned worse than a marshmallow, and we decide that this is a good time to just head to the local bar and drink away all of our problems. Unfortunately, instead of finding a bar, we find an underground facility below the asylum, so I guess it's time to explore some more. Miles is becoming more and more unhinged at this stage, and things are looking very sketchy for our journalist buddy. Mount Massive has taken its toll on him. As if things couldn't get any worse, we run into Walker from before. As he goes to kill Miles, we can see that the Walrider is making very short work of him, essentially turning him into, like tomato soup. We hear a voice from the nearby room, asking us to come in and speak with them, as they have something that they wish to explain. It turns out that the person in front of Miles is actually Dr. Vernick. He says how he is supposed to be dead, but has no such luck. That he is older than sin, but he is here because of Billy. Billy takes care of him, Vernick speculates that Billy might think that he is his father since he certainly loves him before calling him a poor idiot. He begins talking about a technology involving nanohazards, little microscopic machines that they could never master. But using his research, Murkov was able to find a bit of a workaround. You can turn the cells of a human body into a nanofactory. Since the natural function of cells is to produce molecules, you can use the psychosomatic direction to engineer the precise molecules necessary. He mentions that it was foolish to think that they could control it. He asks Miles to stop Billy, murder him if need be, turn off his life support and anesthesia to undo what he had done. Nobody can leave Mount Massive while he lives. We do manage to find the device being used and note that Billy is at the center of it. I must say that after finding Billy, that looks uncomfortable as hell. I mean, think of the back problems. We turn off the support systems after hearing a terrifying sound as the nanobots come for Miles' ass. We hit the burners to run away from the thing, but it turns out that the Walrider is a lot quicker than us. It's a really bad time for Miles, but thankfully the system shut down and it kills Billy, meaning the Walrider is no more. However, the injuries sustained in the fight for Miles are pretty bad. As he opens the doors to the exit, he is greeted by Dr. Vernick and a bunch of soldiers. They open fire on Miles, and right as you think that he is dead, we hear Vernick's gasp as he now realizes that Miles has become the host of the Walrider after Billy's death. Sounds of gunshots and screams can be heard as the screen cuts to black. And that is the story of Outlast 1. I must say that it is a very sad story that puts victims at the forefront. The most vulnerable are being taken advantage of, including Billy. Nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you made it all the way to the end, make sure to write Walrider in the comments down below so I can see. We will be doing more videos on the Outlast stories in the future, so make sure to keep an eye out for that. Be sure to like the video as it helps out the channel immensely, and subscribe for more Story Explained videos in the future. Until next time, peace.